We're here on the Hemp Channel Television with attorney Jeffrey Steinborn. Welcome, Jeff. How you doing?
Thanks. Nice to be here.
You have been one of the leading attorneys in the marijuana movement here in the Pacific Northwest and beyond for quite a long time. Why don't you tell us briefly how you got involved in this and what your passion is tonight?
Well, you know, I started out practicing law in the 60s, and in the 60s there were a couple of issues. There was the draft, and after the draft there was drugs, mostly marijuana. And it seemed like a good way to practice criminal law without having to associate with criminals. So that became my specialty, I guess.
Now, I know you're associated with potbust.com. Potbust.com. Why don't you tell us briefly about that website?
Well, that's just a website that it's an article I wrote a long time ago that I've expanded. It's a work in progress. It is a website devoted to the victims of the war on marijuana, of which there are about 700,000 a year, and hopefully there's enough useful information on there and useful links to get people through life without getting in trouble, and maybe to give them some ideas about how to become active in the political environment and do something about what they don't like.
Here in Washington State, and more specifically in Seattle, what's the most common prosecution for marijuana? Is it just simple possession? Or?
Well, you know, it's funny. Seattle we have this initiative, but it really wasn't necessary because in Seattle, I don't see a lot of pot prosecutions. It's not a high priority. But I work the whole state, and every neighborhood is famous for different things. On the east side, Bellevue, Bothell, Kirkland, Mercer Island, the police like to stop you and bust you for smoking pot if your car smells of pot. And I have to assume that here in Seattle, if they smell pot in your car, they're not paying attention because I'm not seeing any car pot busts in Seattle.
For the benefit of our viewers, what's the worst area in Washington State? What would you, if you were, what would you avoid if you were a pot user and you're driving down the highway?
Oh, there's no.
Bellevue, I've heard Bellevue's pretty bad.
There's no answer to that, but stay out of the east side is pretty bad. The east side of Lake Washington is pretty bad, and so is the peninsula. Kitsap County can be very difficult to deal with, and they seem to like the two-bit pot bust so well.
Say somebody's pulled over for something, they smell something in their car, they search them, and they find, say they find an 1/8 ounce or a 1/4 ounce of marijuana. What's probably going to happen to that person? What should they be prepared for?
Well,
simple possession.
It's a simple possession charge. They're going to search your car and possibly browbeat you. But what you get when you go to court is, if you're convicted, you get a day in jail. If you're caught with over 40 grams, it's a felony, and there is no mandatory jail sentence. But for under 40 grams, not only is it a day in jail, but if you're a student, you lose your student aid, certain kinds of welfare, food stamps.
Big issue.
The consequences are just astronomical.
And you don't have to be a student. Anybody who gets one marijuana felony on their record loses Pell Grant, student loans, affordable housing, welfare, all those entitlements for the rest of their life?
Well, a marijuana felony is, in Washington, if it's in state court, can be vacated after 6 years of good behavior.
Okay.
If it's federal, it never comes off your record.
So for the rest of your life,
you're a felon.
You don't get those
That's
things.
Right. And I saw a headline today in the paper. Everybody's all shocked that there seem to be some felons out there teaching young people in school, coaching. Yeah. And I wonder what those felonies are. I bet they get a lot more excited about drug felonies.
Is this? Now let me ask you: if this is just a drug felony that makes you ineligible for those entitlements?
Any felony.
Any felony. So Martha Stewart.
No, but for
no
certain programs, for certain programs, it's just drug felonies.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
And I think Martha Stewart is probably still going to be able to get her Social Security and her welfare.
Okay. How much is this statement true or false? If the counterculture of the 1960s had not embraced marijuana as a cultural icon or a cultural item, marijuana would be legal today?
That's a tough one to call because I think that the hidden hand here is something more than just the process, the progress of our culture.
That's an excuse, not a cause?
Yeah, I think so. And I really think that it's mostly about either money, whether you're the pharmaceutical industry, the law enforcement, corrections,
P-test,
it's all
down the line, yeah.
Drug lawyers such as myself, everybody's making money
bail bondsmen, yeah.
off of this, or else it's about a smoke screen to do whatever the person throwing that smoke wants to do. to get yourself elected. In the case of the Bush crime family, it's a smokescreen, I think, to loot the planet while we're all distracted with this war on marijuana, among other wars.
Right. Medical marijuana, or marijuana, has been around for about 4,000 years, 5,000 years. 34 states and Washington, D.C., which combined are home to over 70% of the U.S. population, have laws on the books that allow or are otherwise favorable to medical marijuana. But the federal government makes no exception for the use of marijuana. That's basically a part of this entire scenario. The federal government's just adamantly going to be against medical marijuana no matter what we do, you think?
It does seem that way, although, you know, the states one by one are starting to come into line, and I think it's possibly because the state representatives are more directly responsible to the voters.
Constituents, yeah.
And the voters, you know, the voters feel really strongly about this issue, this medical marijuana issue, but it's puzzling because it doesn't translate into votes at the poll on any other issue. You can get 70 or 80% of the people to come out and vote for medical marijuana, but those same people will not vote for or against a candidate just because he or she's got a good or bad stand about that. But I think that's going to change, and here's the reason. I think people are starting to see more and more that for a lot of them, marijuana as a medicine really is in their self-interest. People are starting to understand that it may be a substitute for the expensive, debilitating pharmaceuticals that we're all getting strung out on. I mean, really, we are the sheep that are being milked or fleeced, bad metaphor, being fleeced by the pharmaceutical industry. Look in your medicine cabinet and count the bottles if you think I'm kidding. Everybody's got it.
So some communities are debating whether or not to go to Canada for their drugs. For some people, it might be as simple as the guy in the black leather jacket down the street.
Yeah, I mean, the old dope peddler spreading joy wherever he goes. I don't know if that's it, but let me finish what I was getting to.
Absolutely.
Because it's becoming clearer and clearer that it's in our interest as we get older, as the baby boomers get older, get more diseased, that it's in our interest. It's not just a good thing to have medical marijuana. It relates to us directly, just like jobs. I'm going to need this stuff when I get older. People are starting to see that. And as more and more people see that, I think they will cross the street to vote this issue as an issue that's important to them rather than just, yeah, it's okay, but I'm not going to vote for a candidate one way or the other. So I think in the future we're going to see it as a significant issue in political elections.
Well, I think, you know, here in the 21st century, we're 30 some odd years past the 60s. Almost everybody has either known somebody who smoked pot or had a relative who's gotten ill or sick. I mean, it's starting to touch people's lives. And as that happens, it kind of demystifies marijuana. There's really a myth around marijuana, a societal myth that it's criminally connected somehow.
Well, it's demonized, and it's, the demonization of it is not rational, I think. I think it's really, for a lot of people, marijuana is the devil. It's evil. Any part of it is evil, whether it's medicinal, recreational, hemp, you name it. It's just the devil. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure that logic is going to attack that stronghold. I'm not quite sure how you break into that one, except, you know, my position is that we should decriminalize marijuana across the board, and that at that point you resolve the issue of what a doctor can do and what a doctor can't do. But certainly medical marijuana is our foot in the door because it's something that's relevant to everybody, and it may cast a light on the absurdity of this law. So for that reason, I really strongly believe that we've got to push this issue. Right. And that's another reason why I think in the long run we ought to treat this more as a beneficial herb than as a medicine, because obviously, as everybody who's ever used it as a medicine knows, it's not, you know, take 2 every 4 hours. You take it
when
as
you
need it.
Stop.
And the beauty of it is, unlike certain other drugs you're taking, it's not going to hurt you if you happen to take 10% too much or 100% too much. It's not going to affect you.
For the benefit of our viewers, again, say you get popped with, you get arrested, and you've got a non-felony possession with intent to deliver.
That's always a felony.
Or, excuse me, you get simple possession. It's not intent to deliver. How much is it worth a defense? I mean, how much is somebody, how much is it going to drain somebody's...
You're asking a lawyer whether it's worth hiring a lawyer?
Yeah.
Well, I tell my clients
how much trouble is somebody getting into? How much of their resources is going to eat up?
It depends on who they are and where they work and what their plans are for the future. If you have a union job or a job for any of the major employers, you get busted for a misdemeanor pot bust, it can be an economic death sentence. It can be devastating to you and your family. In some jurisdictions, they'll try to take your children away for it. Here in King County, we're a bit more civilized than that, but it really, unfortunately, there's no uniformity, and the consequences can be extreme, even a misdemeanor pot bust. So it depends on what it's going to mean to you in your own life. Some people, you know, couldn't care less about 24 hours in jail, and they don't want to spend the money on a lawyer. Some don't have a job to lose or a family to be jeopardized, so it really depends. A lawyer can do something for you about half the time in these misdemeanor pot cases.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey Steinborn, attorney at law, thank you for your tireless work, and thanks for being on the Hemp Channel Television.
Always a pleasure,
See you
Vivian.
soon.